and Margins, Origin, Conflicts and Issues. This session accommodates 10 paper presenters. I'm sure that we are joined by 2 of them, and we are still waiting 8 of us to join. So Souvik and Somenath, with your permission, maybe just wait for another 5 minutes so that all of them join in. Would that be all right?
Yes, sir, no problem.
Okay. Please don't call me sir. This is Shoronno Sen over here. So it would be much appreciated if you call me by my name. It's Shoronno, right?
Okay.
Good morning, Shoronno. Good morning. Yeah. Well, as the IFEST team has already informed you in the chat box that we are live on YouTube and this session will be recorded. So as and when we begin, this is a request from the chair that please keep your videos on and try and be a little attentive on the screen, because this would be recorded and this is going live on YouTube, right? So once we start, the earnest request is to keep your videos on. Thank you. We'll be waiting for another 2 to 3 minutes and we'll start this session off. And as and when people join in, I'll let them in. And in the meantime, the session must continue, right? So we'll be waiting for another 2 minutes maximum. As I can see, we are joined by Shomallo, and we're still waiting for other 7 of us to join. Because from the list that I have, it reads with the hosting, and we have the good opportunity of listening to as many as 10 participants, 10 paper presenters. The time was 10 a.m. of course, and we have already exceeded that by 3 minutes. So 4 minutes now. So I guess this is time we start, and as and when people join in, they would get their chances. Our first speaker for the day was Somenath Bhattacharjee, but I guess Somenath Bhattacharjee is not present as of now. So this gives us the opportunity of listening to Somenath Mahato, who is the second on the list, but by virtue of the absence of Somenath Bhattacharjee, another Somenath would get his chance a little early. Somenath, would that be all right if you are the first presenter for the day? Okay. So I once again extend a formal welcome to all the participants. This is parallel session 5 of day 2 of the international seminar organized by the Department of English and Department of Bangla, Soumyadeep Banerjee, in association with the IQAC of 2 collaborating colleges. One, of course, is Soumyadeep Banerjee itself, and the other one is my own institution. It is Purashkanpur Haridas Nandi Mahavidyalaya. I'm Shoronno Sen. I'll be chairing this session. I'm the head of the Department of English at Purashkanpur Haridashanandi Mahavidyalaya, as well as I happen to be the I2C coordinator of the institution as well. So we are in this technical session, which is of course a parallel session number 5 for day 2. As we do not have the presence of our first speaker, Somenath Mahato, the second speaker on the list has kindly agreed to present his paper. So we're all yours, Somenath. You may start as and when you're ready.
Well, sir, please allow me to share my screen.
Sure. And just one more thing, as you are sharing your screen, may I request all the participants who have joined a little late, please, all of you, turn your cameras on. This session is going live on YouTube, as well as it will be recorded as well for future references. So if you kindly keep your videos on while the session is on, it would be much appreciated. Yes, Somenath, your screen is visible to us.
Okay.
And from the abstract has the title of your proposed paper. It is a study of the traditional number system. No, this is Somenath Bhattacharjee. Somenath Mahato's paper is Narrative and Resistance and the Birth of New Woman, a study of Mahasweta Devi's The Hunt. Right?
Yes.
Somenath, the stage is yours. Yeah.
Okay. My name is Somenath Mahato, and last year I passed my post-graduation from the Department of English, Sidhukanu Birsa University, Purulia. Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Panchla Mahavidyalaya and Purashkanpur Haridashanandi Mahavidyalaya for providing me the opportunity to present my paper in this international webinar. Well, before going to the main topic or the topic under discussion in this webinar, from my side, I want to illustrate some key facts regarding Mahasweta Devi and her writings. Well, Mahasweta Devi was an Indian writer and activist. She wrote over 100 novels and over 20 collections of short stories in Bengali, but often translated to other languages. The present story under discussion is taken from Imaginary Maps, which was translated into English by post-colonial scholar Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. Mahasweta Devi's specialization lay in the studies of Adivasi, Dalit, marginalized, with a focus on their women. She lived in Adivasi villages for years, befriending them and learning from them. She frankly claimed that her stories were not her creation, but the stories of the people of her own country. Well, before understanding the resistance of Mahasweta Devi and the birth of new woman in the form of her protagonist Mary Ora in the short story, we need to understand the position of women or the projection of women in Indian society. Well, I would like to start my presentation with the quotation of Rousseau that says, "Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains." In Indian society, it is partially true, as here the statement of Rousseau is not applicable to the women. In India, women are born free, but everywhere bounded by the norms of the society. They are considered as weak and the inferior to men. They are the angel in the house. The Indian society considered women as weak, inferior, and man defines woman not in herself, but as related to him. She is not regarded as an autonomous being. She is the incidental and essential as opposed to the essential. It means that the society defines the identity of women. They lack their voice, their position in the society. They learn their role in the society by men. By the virtue, a woman is not bounded by norms of the society, but it is society that compels them to be so. About women, J.S. Miller rightly says, if women lived in a different country from men and never faced men, they would have a different image about themselves. For who can understand a woman better than herself? Well, Mahasweta Devi, the voice of the voiceless marginalized people and the beacon of light of the subaltern community, through the mighty power of her pen, raises their issue. She becomes their spokesperson Through her writings, she portrays the miseries, sufferings, cruelties that women have to tolerate to live in the society. Universally, the marginalized are regarded as quote unquote other, but within the marginalized society, it is the women who are regarded as quote unquote other. In The Hunt, which is included in the collection of short stories, Imaginary Maps, Devi, through the portrayal of Mary O'Rourke, breaks the myth that women are passive, other, inferior to men, and tolerate the injustice done upon them. Through her Devi resists the very idea of women of post-independent Indian society. From marriage, birth to marriage, Devi presents her uniquely as she challenges, that is, Mary O'Rourke challenges the orthodox norms of the Indian society. Mahasweta Devi, like Judith Butler's Gender Trouble, shows the role of gender discrimination in the marginalized and Dalit society of Tohri and Kuruda in the short story under discussion. Here, Devi gives feather to women and set up the very concept of new woman in the Indian scenario. Devi's Mary is equal to men in all aspects. She is even superior to men, that Mahasweta Devi has shown through a marriage attitude to deal with the people, both insiders and outsiders. Mahasweta Devi's Mary O'Rourke, unlike Binodini in Rabindranath Tagore's Chokher Bali and Bimola in Ghore Baire, Mary is the queen of her wishes. She is modeled on a character whom Devi had seen and heard about in one of her visits to Lapra. Devi's Mary is multitasking through her hands. She is capable of sundry works. Devi mentioned in the short story that Mary is capable of doing the work of 12 ayahs. As Devi Durga possesses a trident to fear the demons, here Mary possesses a razor-sharp machete that she used to raise against her suitors in the Tohri market. The Austrian-blooded girl is beyond an ordinary Orang girl. Her way of dealing and selling vegetables in the Tohri market is commendable. Through her, they will provide masculine features to give ear to the girls of the tribal communities. Devi very clearly pictures the exploitation of natural wealth and as well as the common folks of India by the outsiders. In the name of enlightenment, they came to the marginalized parts of India and used to exploit both the nature and as well as the simple, ignorant folks. In the story under discussion, it is Tahsildar Singh, the demon who comes to Kuruda to destroy the naturalness of Kuruda. And it is Prasadji's pig-headed son, Banwari, who takes the initiative to welcome this greedy crocodile to make the peaceful atmosphere of Kuruda become a center of chaos. Like Satan in Milton's Paradise Lost, it is Tahsildar Singh who comes Kuruda to destroy the naturalness of Kuruda. But it is Mary O'Rourke who takes the initiative to make people aware about the tricky nature of Tahsildar Singh. Thus, Mary becomes the obstacle between Tahsildar Singh and his huge profit. Mary's tremendous effort to resolve the problem is supported by the statement of Indian novelist Shashi Deshpande's remark that she makes in her essay, Why I Am a Feminist. Her remark is, quote unquote, the female species has the same right to be born, to survive, to fulfill herself, and shape her life according to her needs and the potential that lies within her as
Somenath,
the
we have
male
two
head.
minutes.
Okay, sir, I will finish within 2 minutes.
Sure.
Exploitation remains inherent within the blood of the demon. Tahsildar Singh is not an exception. For a long time, the outsiders used to come to the tribal villages and taking the advantage of the ignorance and simplicity, they used to exploit the tribal girls. Here, Tahsildar Singh tries his best to catch the free bird, Mary O'Rourke, and to put it in his net, but he failed. Devi projects mentioned the year that is an exceptional year, as it is the woman's turn in this Jani Parab to hunt, and Mary decides to hunt this real animal and clean this black spot from the society. So in the feast day of Jani Parab, Mary Orao invites her behind the rock, and as Devi Durga killed demon Mahishasur to end an era of evil, so also Mary Orao hunts Tasildar Singh. To conclude, like most of Devi's stories, The Hunt portrays the journey of her female protagonist, self-discovery, and her place in the male-dominated society. The journey of Mary is not a bed of roses, but a bed of thorns. She discovers herself as well as her identity through the resistance of the patriarchal bounds. Through Mary, Mahasweta Devi gives air to her revolutionary zeal. It is through Mary Devi wants to set up her view that once a dignified woman is always a dignified woman, and when system fails to justify, violence is justified. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shona. Thank you. That was a very engaging discussion on the hunt. You have taken up
Yes,
the
sir.
issue. You have taken up the issue of the resistance and the woman in a patriarchally dominated society, even in the tribal space, which is quite intriguing. Whenever I go through hunt or whenever I have the good opportunity of teaching Mahasweta Devi, I've always found that the element of violence that you have mentioned, it always has its own constructive side, right? The violence exerted by the state, is capital state, on the tribals, and the resistant violence of them, which is so constructive, how that is portrayed, intrigues me, to be honest. Thanks for rekindling my interest
Well,
once
sir,
again in this idea.
it is true. Even in case of northeastern studies, well, my
Absolutely.
area of interest is
Okay.
northeastern studies.
Right. When
Well,
this paper would be published, I'd love to give it a reading, Shona. Very nice effort, and I wish you all the best for your future endeavors. Right.
well, sir, thank you.
Right. This brings me to our third speaker of the day, but let me inquire if Somenath Bhattacharjee has joined us. Somenath Bhattacharjee, are you here? I guess Somenath is not here from where I can see. So we'll be moving to our third speaker on the list and second speaker in de jure terms, de facto terms actually. This is Soumalya Nag. Soumalya, I can see you. You are present, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Soumalya, from where I can see, the title of your proposed paper is Selvadurai's Funny Boy, right? It's rereading the novel as an account of post-colonial hybridity through the chapter The Best School of All, and character Arjie's presentation through the term subaltern, right? Soumalya, as and when
Yes,
you are
sir.
ready, the stage is yours. And one more thing, Soumalya, I'll give you a little bit of reminder of the time on the 8th minute of your presentation, and by 10th, you have to finish it off. Right.
Okay.
Right. All the best.
Most post-colonial writing has concerned itself with the hybridized nature of post-colonial culture. Oppression is not the only way that helps on the transaction of the post-colonial world. Rather, it stresses the mutuality of the process. Hybridity develops new anti-monolithic models of cultural exchange and growth. Hybridity occurs in post-colonial societies as a result of cultural suppression when the colonial power invades to centralize political and economic control, or when the settler invaders forces the autochthonous people to espouse to new social patterns of immigration from the metropolitan and imperial societies. Also originates hybridity through the continued process that produce complex cultural palimpsests with the post-colonial world. For Bakhtin, hybridity is a mixture of two social languages within the limits of a single utterance, an encounter within the arena of an utterance between two different linguistic consciousness separated from one another by an epoch, by social differentiation, or by some other factor. Vava argues that an important change of perspective occurs when the effect of colonial power is seen to be the production of hybridization rather than the noisy command of colonialist authority or the silent repression of native traditions. According to Robert Young, hybridity therefore describes a process in which the single voice of colonial authority undermines the operation of colonial power by inscribing and disclosing the trace of the other so that it reveals itself as double-voiced. Man-making capacity of the British model school is typified in the 5th chapter, The Best School of All. Arjie's father announces Arjie that he is transferring him from his present school, St. Gabriel, to Queen Victoria Academy to cure him of his perceived funniness. A boy who likes to dress up like girls. When Arjie demands an explanation about the cause of this transformation, his father Selva replies, "The academy will force you to become a man." Arjie's brother Diggy adds a note of caution. "Once you come to the Queen Victoria Academy, you are a man. Either you take it like a man or the other boys will Selva's story. The story that centralized the public schools is by other texts of Kipling's, Orwell's, Forster's, were the Englishmen who have been vocally critiqued the shortcomings and tyranny of public schools. The character of Black Tie satisfies the authoritarian and abusive attitude of the British Queen Academy and in turn Sri Lankan society. As Arjie will later learn, Black Tie was an orphan raised by the Academy's previous British principal, Mr. Lawton. That's why Black Tie advocates with the values that Mr. Lawton taught him, such as the importance of a perfect system and corporal punishment. By describing Black Tie's eccentric, outmoded attire, Selvadurai creates an image of the proverbial brown sahib. According to Murtuja, New World's poetry in Funny Boy seems as a reminder of the functions of public school education both in Britain and its colonies. The best school of all, three images, New World, Black Tie, and Mr. Selvaratnam fuse into each other in Arjie's mind. This fusion is intriguing. How a British poet glorifying the English school, a Sri Lankan school headmaster upholding the colonial legacy of education, and Arjie's father, a beneficiary of colonialism, merge in Arjie's consciousness. Through the Arjie Sehan love story, Selvadurai revisits a secret of English public schools, a secret which was not too well kept. English public schools of the late 19th and 20th century were hubs of homosexual liaisons, a reality which the colonizers tried their best to hide. G.F. Green's school story in the making, dramatizing the pleasures and pains of young boy Randall's growing desire for his charming senior Felton, is one of the first English novels to unveil the secret. Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, one of the prominent subaltern writers, has opined in her famous essay, "Can the Subaltern Speak?" that the subaltern can't revolt. They are speechless and unpicturable in the society. They are deviated from the mainstream culture. Sumit Sarkar opines that the term is ambiguous because it doesn't have stable identity. As it is a heterogeneous term, it can't be denoted to a particular group in the society. It does not have single criterion to identify as a subaltern. At the first chapter, Arjie's father otherizes him from his mother. Her fatness wants to otherize Arjie from the game Bride. Diggy and other cousins humiliates and dejects Arjie by not taking him in their cricket teams. Rather, they yields Arjie's new nickname as Garly Boy. In the third chapter, Arjie confesses that Daryl Uncle's presence shifts his Amma's attention from him to Daryl Uncle, which otherizes Arjie from his mother. In this sense, I think Arjie is a perfect subaltern character or oppressed subject. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shomalo. That was well within time. It was, Shomalo, would it be possible for you to stay visible for a while? Because we are actually live. Right. Shomalo, first and foremost, it's good that you have taken up something which this particular seminar would always like to delve into, and that is the fact of the sexual border, and that too in childhood, which I'm sure that you have done in great details. What actually I guess is the biggest takeaway from your paper is that you know the very fact of functioning of the body, how it is determined by the colonial oppressive system, and how uh, the subaltern reacts to it and resists the same. This is how this is what I guess your paper have brought out pretty well in a pretty nuanced manner. So congratulations on that, and I wish you all the best for your future endeavors. Thank you, Shomala, for your paper. This brings us to the next speaker for the day. I'd once again inquire for the last time before before which we move to our next speaker is Somenath Mahato present? Nope, I guess Somenath is not here today. So we'll be moving to Soumilee Dasgupta.
Yes,
Right. Soumilee Dasgupta, from where I can see, the paper is of centers and margins, origin, conflicts, and
no,
issues,
sir,
but unfortunately,
actually,
it doesn't really have a title proper.
no, they mistakenly titled my paper after the title of the seminar that we are
Okay,
participating. My
fine
paper
then.
is titled
So,
something else. I would read
all right,
the
sure. Shomali, it would be much appreciated if you could kindly turn your video on, and
Yes.
second up, please, state your institutional affiliation along with the title of your paper, and start off with your presentation as and when you're ready.
Good morning to everyone. I am a secondary student at the Department of Comparative Literature, Jadavpur University. And my paper is titled Tales from the East and Northeast, a feminist reading of the short stories of Suchitra Bhattacharjee and Tensula Ao. I would attempt a synchronic study of the short stories written by Suchitra Bhattacharjee and Tensula Ao. I would try to look at the kind of feminist discourse that is employed in the narratives and the way it varies according to their status and sociocultural identity. I would also like to issue a trigger warning because certain parts of my paper contains harrowing details of rape. On 15th August 1947, India declared itself independent from the British rule. What followed next was the history of an erstwhile colonized country trying to stand on its feet. This period was characterized with political turmoil, upsurges, separatist movements, and tension between India and Pakistan and the freedom of East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, rise of the new Indian voter, and so on. Along with the country, Bengal too was going through a political destabilization and anarchy following the bloodshedding Naxalbari movement. In the last 2 decades of the century, the Communist Party took over the state, and it is at this very moment that Bangla literary canon witnessed the arrival of Suchitra Bhattacharjee. She inherited the legacy of writers like Ashapurna Devi and Mahasweta Devi and was deeply influenced by them. Ashapurna Devi, who was never institutionally educated, wrote about the women in our interiors, our mothers, wives, and daughters, whose life began and ended in the kitchen, and whose only function on earth was as baby-producing machines. On the other hand, Mahasweta Devi, a declared leftist, was interested in the lives of the Dalits, the marginalized, and oppressed, particularly their women. Suchitra chose to write about both the interior as well as the exterior world. Her protagonists, often single mothers or divorced women, are ready to go out and take on the world, but at the same time, they often end up conforming to the gender norms that the patriarchal society set for them. One of her most celebrated works, Dohon, also adapted to a film by Rituparna Ghosh, is an ideal example of how her characters failed to rise above the systematic oppression lashed out against them. Both Romita and Jhinuk ending up as their families and partners wanting them to be. For the purpose of this paper, however, I am trying to look at the author's short stories from a feminist perspective and also as a socio-political testimony of her time. The tone of the short story, Ami Madhavi, is written based on a meta-narrative from the Uddok Parva of the Mahabharata. It tells the tale of Madhavi, a princess born to King Jajati. The tone of the narrative is extremely sharp and sarcastic throughout. written in the first person's voice. In the very opening paragraph, the narrator refuses to disclose her mother's identity and says, "মা তো শুধুই গর্ভধারণের আধার, তার পরিচয় কোন কাজে লাগে?" Interestingly, this stands as true today as it was back in the days of the Mahabharata. Till today, schools consider the father's identity quintessential while admitting students, jeopardizing those single mothers who wish to keep the father's identity concealed. An actress and the people's representative is harassed and questioned not on the basis of her performance, but because she chose to not disclose the identity of the father of her unborn child. Later in the story, Madhavi satirically comments, "পশু পাখির জগতে শিশু মায়ের, মানে মানুষের জগতে নয়." Madhavi is surprised when her father asks her to depart with Rishi Galop for the purpose of arranging Guru Dakshina for his master Vishwamitra. Madhavi's body is used as a site to produce male lineage for great kings, not once but thrice, in lieu of horses that Vishwamitra asks from Galop. Still not able to pay his master back, Galop decides to offer Madhavi as a compensation, who for the fourth time has to offer her body in order to save her father's honor and for the man who she loves. The story ends with Madhavi returning to her father's kingdom after serving 3 kings and a sage, again being forced to marry. However, it should be noted that Suchita Bhattacharjee paints Madhavi and in turn the entire women folk as emotionally vulnerable beings who are ready to go to any end to prove their love. আশ্চর্য নারীর মন, কাঙ্ক্ষিত পুরুষকে বিপদে সাহায্য করাই নারীর ধর্ম। Madhavi agrees to sleep with 3 kings just for the exchange of Galop's words that he would take her back. If we attempt a linguistic analysis of the narrative, Bhattacharya can be found criticizing the apparently learned and wise Brahmin and brave kings. Rishi Galop refers to her throughout as Jajatir Me and not even once by her own name. A sage like Vishwamitra is found saying, "এমন একটা মেয়ে ছেলে তোর হাতে আছে, অথচ তাকে তুই আমার কাছে আগে আনিসনি Galop?" As if to remind us once again, whether a king or a sage, the lust for a woman's flesh remains quite the same across all varnas. After he is done using Madhavi to the brim, he lets her go and Madhavi sarcastically comments, "ছেলে জন্মাতেই ঋষির কামজর উধাও, বুঝিবা পরম ব্রহ্মের কথা মনে পড়ে গেল, তুচ্ছ মানবীতে আর কতদিনই বা আটকে থাকতে পারেন সাধু পুরুষরা." Madhavi directly establishes a dialogue with the patriarchal society. মেয়েদের এতটুকু গৌরব দিতে এত কার্পণ্য, হায় রে পুরুষ, compelled by what she has to grow through. All her life, she didn't meet a single man after whom she could rebuild her trust on men. At the end of the story, when asked to choose a man of her choice, she says, "কাকে পড়াবো এ মালা? কোন হর্ষস্য দিবদাস উশিনর অথবা বিশ্বামিত্রকে, অথবা কোন গালককে? এদের কাউকেই না বাছার স্বাধীনতা আছে, কিন্তু তারপর বাবার আশ্রয় থাকা, সেও তো পুরুষ। বাবা মারা গেলে ভাইদের আশ্রয়, সেও তো পুরুষ। অপেক্ষা করবো কতদিনে ছেলেরা বড় হয়ে মাকে নিয়ে যাবে, হায় রে ততদিনে তারাও আস্তে একটা পুরুষ মানুষ হয়ে যাবে." The story ends but leaves Madhavi's disgust for purush ringing in the hearts of the reader. It is perhaps this disgust that prompted the author to pen the short story Nari Tantrik, the story of a dystopian world where gender roles are completely reversed. A world where the protagonist, a man Biman, feels guilty for indulging in his own aspirations and interests and neglecting the responsibilities of the সংসার. When the house help Ratoner Bap complains of his wife beating him, Biman responds, "বউ যখন পছন্দ করে না তাহলে করো কেন? পুরুষ মানুষের স্বভাব চরিত্র নিয়ে কথা ওটা কি ভালো?" Biman's day starts with waking up his daughter, preparing her for school, cooking, ironing, dusting the entire house, a scenario very, very known to all of us. He gossips with his neighbor, "এমন মেয়ে চাটা পুরুষ আমি আর দুটো দেখি, এত মার খায় তবু শিক্ষা হয় না, যে তোর ভাত কাপড় দেয় তুই তার কোনো কথা মান্য করবি না." Biman laments that in spite of his educational qualification, his wife did not allow to go and get a job. His wife, Anuradha, accuses him, "বাজার হাটে তো যেতে হয় না, খাচ্ছ দাচ্ছ আর দেশ কুমড়ো হয়ে বসে আছো, শুধু একটু খুন্তি নাড়ার কাজ, তাও এত হেলাফেলা." Leaving Biman to think, নারী জাতটা কি এতটাই নিষ্ঠুর হয়? Suchitra presents to us the reality that she witnesses, but the marginalization that her women face are primarily gender-centric. But if we navigate further east to the indigenous communities of the northeast India, we would be able to witness a completely different reality experienced by the Aboriginal women of this region.
Soumyadeep, we have 2 more minutes. We have 2 more minutes, right? Yeah.
Who is a poet, ethnographer, and a short story writer hailing from the marginalized indigenous Ao-Naga community, presents to us her own world, a world where women face triple marginalization in terms of their gender, class, as well as ethnicity. Writing around the same period as Suchitra, Ao's female protagonists are caught in constant conflicts between the state, army, and separatists. Ao's collection of short stories entitled These Hills Called Home, Stories from a War Zone, and Laburnum from My Head throw a light on women's predicament in politically volatile and violence-ridden world. A world where a man's worst fear is that he would be dead, and that of a woman is that she would be dead as well as violated. The last song from the anthology, These Hills Called Home, is the story of Apenio, a young girl who was born to sing. She was known for her voice and was an important member in the village church choir. One day, the army raids the church, but Apenio doesn't stop singing. Next, the army chief grabbed Apenio by her hair and, with a bemused look on his face, dragged her away from the crowd. The readers witnessed the young captain raping Apenio while a few soldiers were watching the act and seemed to be waiting for their turn. Apenio's mother, crazed by what she was witnessing, rushed forward with an animal-like growl as if to haul the man off her daughter's body, but a soldier grabbed her and pinned her down on the ground, bashed her head with hard ground several times, knocking her unconscious, and raped her limp body. The tale of Apenio continued to live through generations in the Naga community, a tale passed on to younger generations by the older ones. To conclude, in Suchitra Bhattacharjee's stories, some women succeeded to break through the patriarchal norms to actually go out and work, attain a certain economic independence, and live a life in their own terms. Increased scope in the job market for women actually made it possible to support a family all by themselves. But it is also to be noted that Bhattacharya seldom moves beyond her own class identity to try to navigate beyond the Kolkata urban society. At the same time, Ao's women fight for basic needs like food, shelter, and against the exploitation of the army. Being marginalized by gender, class, ethnicity, and even religion, these women's bodies are used as sites of carrying out political violence, and rape is used as a weapon of war. And Ao gives a voice to these women. Voices that may not be deafeningly loud, but clear and distinct. Thank you.
Thank you, Soumyadeep. That was a stark reminder that why we pursue humanities and why we do need to pursue humanities. I mean, more than ever, perhaps in these troubled times. A Calcutta metropolitan space and a northeastern tribal plain. The connect that you have managed to establish quite successfully just goes on to show that the oppression, the entire patriarchal design of marginalization that this seminar wishes to explore at length has its own insidious design that kind of affects irrespective of class boundaries. And what I actually like about your paper is that you do not want to generalize the two narratives. You have actually maintained the idiosyncrasy of Suchitra Bhattacharjee's tale as well as the tale from the other author, but still that somatic connect that you have managed to establish, the body being the site of violence, is something that I appreciate a lot, and I wish you all the best for your future academic endeavors. Thank you. Right. This brings us to the next presenter, Soumilee Banerjee. Soumyadeep, I can see you are present. The title of his proposed paper, Soumilee's proposed paper, is Hints from the Hinterland, Navigating the Marginalized in the Tempest. Right? Soumilee, as and when you are ready, please let us know about your institutional affiliation and start off with your presentation. Just one more announcement. I was just informed by the IFES team that all the participants are hereby requested once again to kindly keep your videos on, all of you, because we are going live on YouTube, and it would seem a little, odd if we kind of remain invisible. So this request goes to all the participants. Yes, Soumilee, your presentation is visible to us.
Yes, sir. Good morning to everyone. Good morning, sir. I'm glad.
It's short on no, right? Sir is too formal. Thank you.
Yes, sir, can I continue?
Sure, please do. Please do.
Yes. I'm happy to be a part of this session, and a big thanks to the organizers who are organizing successfully this event, even in the midst of this challenging time. And I am Soumilee Banerjee. I am pursuing my master's degree in English language and literature from the University of Calcutta. I'm a student of the final semester. Now, is the screen visible on screen?
Yes, it is. If it reads silence followed by a red interrogation mark, then it is visible. Yeah.
Yes, sir, it is. It is. Now, the word silence is visible on the screen. Can we form a new word from this word silence? If we change the position of the letters, then if we notice carefully, a new word comes in, that is license. From the word silence, we obtain the word license. Something very similar happens in Shakespeare's The Tempest, where the central male protagonist, Prospero, obtains license from the silence of a black African woman, Sycorax. Why is she silent? Is she a dumb? She's not. She's silent because the creator god, another white masculine self, that is William Shakespeare, has imposed a silence on the character Sycorax. In the play, Sycorax is present, but not physically, in the mind, in the memory of other characters like Prospero, like Caliban, like Ariel. Now let's move to this structure. Is the structure visible?
It is visible.
So this is the structure. I have tried to create a diagram out of the play, The Tempest, where the central box, the number A, within the square box, there are 3 circles. The square box is the stage of Shakespeare. The creator god Shakespeare has created the drama, the play, The Tempest, within which the central male character, Prospero, works, acts. He is in the center, number D, circle number D. And in the middle is Prospero. And from the center, Prospero acts. And the white portion, the white field, is the place where Prospero has power, where Prospero rules. Prospero, the magician, controls the other characters like Caliban, Gonzalo, or all others. And this green field is often overlooked in the play Tempest. When we read The Tempest, we often overlook this green field. And in this green portion, which is there between the white and the gray, is the memory, is the margin, and where the characters like Setebos and Sycorax dwell. We often overlook this green field, and with that, we overlook the character Sycorax. Whenever we study in our class, in our syllabus, The Tempest, we often keep our concentration on the Caliban Prospero. Often we forget to devote our class, one single class on Sycorax. Why? Because Sycorax is a black woman. She is very much overlooked. Now this green field is the hinterland, wherefrom I have got some hints. I have got the presence of Sycorax. I have found the presence of Sycorax in this green field, from where the title of my paper comes in. That is, Hints from the Hinterland. Navigating the marginalized. Who is the marginalized? Sycorax in The Tempest, Shakespeare's Tempest. Now, you can see clearly that it is the character list of Shakespeare's The Tempest. Here, all characters are present, even Iris, Ceres, who do not play a very important role. Nymphs, reapers, all are here. But Sycorax, who shares a very important role, is not here. Why? Is it because she's a woman, a black woman, first black, then a woman, and from Africa, from the dark continent? Is it so? As I have written in my paper, in my abstract, that the chief aim of this paper is to navigate the importance of the absent presence of the marginalized black woman Sycorax and study how far does she deserve to have individuality and a voice of her own in the text. I do that in my paper. Now let's move to the Saussurean idea of sign equal to signifier plus signified, and try to understand the meaning, the place of Sycorax. What does the name, the title, the word Sycorax signify? Before that, let's move to the character Miranda. Miranda, if we take the word Miranda as sign, then what is the signifier? This image of the woman, this image of the beautiful woman drawn by John Hatter is the signifier. The artist has drawn this image from information, by gathering information from the text. Miranda, if she is this beautiful, then the signified is wonderful, charming, kind, pious, tender, obedient, goddess-like, someone to be admired. If Miranda is the sign and the signifier is this image, beautiful woman, then what is the signified? A wonderful woman, a charming woman, a goddess-like woman. Now, if we move to Prospero, if Prospero is the sign and this man is the signifier, this man is Prospero, then what does Prospero signify? If one reads the play, he or she will understand that Prospero signifies someone who prospers, a powerful white male who has authority, who has the license, who has the power to control, and someone who should be admired. Now, after Miranda and Prospero, if we move to Sycorax, what does the word Sycorax signify? If you see, for Miranda, it was beautiful woman. Prospero, it was a masculine, beautiful white male. But for Sycorax, it is a tremendously hideous old woman. And this picture has been drawn by Robert Anning Bell, gathering information from the text. Like Prospero says that Sycorax is the foul witch, with age and envy was grown into a hoop. And this image clearly shows that. And this Sycorax, the signifier Sycorax signifies ominosity, witch, hideousness, darkness, culturally backwardness, savageness, and someone who should be hated and avoided. This is the place of Sycorax. And how this place, where from this place comes? The white masculine selves like Prospero, Shakespeare, they present Sycorax in this way. Now, what the critics say, we have dealt with the creator god, who is Shakespeare, then the character, male character, that is Prospero. Now, what the white critics say, critics like Frank Kermode, in one of his studies, which is Introduction to the Tempest, says that he tries to create an antithetical relation between the white magic of Prospero and the black magic of Sycorax. He says that Sycorax is a practitioner of natural magic, an egoist. She could command, as a rule, only devils and the lowest order of spirit. She's endowed with many of the qualities of classical witches. She is an old woman, a powerful witch, a devil worshipper. And in the same article, in the same paragraph, for Prospero, Frank Kermode has written, she maintains a harmonic relationship of the elementary, celestial, and the intellectual worlds. He deals with spirits high in the scale of goodness. His art is the absolute perfection of natural philosophy. His art being the art of supernatural virtue, which belongs to the redeemed world of civility and learning, is the antithesis of the black magic of Sycorax. This is what critics like Frank Kermode have to say. Now let's move to this division, center and margin. On one hand, we have creator, character, and the critic. There is a monopoly going on against the condemned, against the weak. Who are the weak? The Sycorax, Caliban, and Sitabos. They are dwelling on the margin. And from the center, these white male characters are constantly dominating. Now,
we have 2 more minutes.
What Claude Lévi-Strauss says is he talks about the idea of binary opposition. What is binary opposition? That there is a structure, the world is a structure, and everything in the world is made up of 2 sides, left and right. On the left comes center, then right margin, war, silence, presence, absence, self, other, good, evil, civilized, savage, present, past, cultured, uncultured, Christian, pagan, controller, controlled, white, black, male, female. And on the left, we have Prospero, and on the right, Sycorax. Like in the Bible, in Genesis, we see, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. God said, let there be light. God is the male figure, said. Not silence, but what? Said, let there be light, not darkness, light. God talked about the left side. Whatever there is in the left, all are good. But whatever there is on the right are bad. So God created the binary opposition from the very beginning. Equally, Shakespeare, the creator God, also created the binary opposition between good and bad in the Tempest through the characters Prospero and Sycorax. For Prospero, he has given the good features, and for Sycorax, he has given the bad, ominous features. And who is Sycorax? Sycorax is the foil to Prospero. And by introducing the character of Sycorax, by introducing the darkness of Sycorax, Shakespeare has tried to show the whiteness of Prospero. That is the intention of the white male creator. Now, in her book, Mary Clegg say that each term has meaning. In the binary opposition, in the opposites, each term has meaning, Sossu's value, which is Sossu's value, only in reference to the other and only as what the other is not. Like, good is good because it is not evil. Civilized is civilized because it is not savage. Equally, Prospero is Prospero because he is not Sycorax. That means then the binary opposites are inseparable in their opposition because the term on one side of the slash only has meaning as the negation of words on the other side of the slash. That means the right is there. That is why the left is there. If Sycorax is there, only then Prospero is there. So the presence of Sycorax is very important, but we often overlook that. Is it because she's dark? And Sycorax is very important. We just need to give attention to her. And in my paper, in the long paper, I have written even in detail the reasons why should we focus on Sycorax and why she is important and why she should be given individuality and she should have her own voice in the text. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Shomodeep. That actually took me back to my MA days, right? When we had to pursue Tempest in such minute details. And thank you for, I should say, rekindling our interest on the elementary aspect that actually constitutes this entire narrative of core and periphery. What actually intrigues me whenever I mean, as I was listening to your presentation, was that how Prospero, with this meta narrative of goodness, could actually validate something as obnoxious as colonial aggression, as a spatial aggression, because it was ultimately Sycorax's island, right? But that gets aggrandized upon, and that gets validated, that aggrandizement gets validated, all in the name of good, all in the name of the holy, right? Thank you for doing that. It was a wonderful paper. You say that you are the final semester student of MA. I can very well remember the final days of my MA, so all the best for your upcoming examination and all the best for your future academic endeavors. Thank you for your paper.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
Thank you.
This brings me to our next speaker for the day, Soumaneel Dasgupta.
Am I audible, sir?
Yep, you are. Soumaneel, as I can see, your paper, the title of it is Decolonization Through Literature, Post-colonial Identity Within Literatures of Contact in South Asia. Right? Soumaneel, as and when you are ready, you may start
shall I begin?
The presentation. Sure.
Okay.
And
so,
I'll just take a minute from you, Soumaneel. I'd request all of you to kindly be visible because I'm constantly reminded of this, that we are live on YouTube. Thank you, Soumaneel, for accepting the offer. And please, Soumaneel, the stage is yours. Please go ahead.
So, hello everyone. I am Soumaneel. I am an MPhil student in the Department of Comparative Literature, Jadavpur University. The title of my paper is Decolonization Through Literature, Post-colonial Identity Within Literatures of Contact in South Asia. Before delving into my paper, I would like to clarify what I am addressing through the term literatures of contact, a term often used in correlation with the terms migration literature and post-colonial literature. Literatures of contact refers to those texts that deal with the many threads of connections, disruptions, and migrations between areas from different geographical and socio-political paradigms, including but not limited to the Eastern and Western civilizations. These texts deal with the legacies of colonialism that continues to persist, the fragmentation of identity, memory, and nationhood, and the conflicts and contrapositions between alien or other cultures. In my paper, I have chosen The Shadow Lines by Amitav Ghosh as the main text, but I will also refer to Shame and Imaginary Homelands by Salman Rushdie from time to time. All three texts in question tends to write back to the colonial center and were written by writers who had first-hand experiences of cultural dislocation. In Rushdie's case, his status as a member of the Indian diaspora living in London and writing in English reflected a particularly poignant aspect of post-colonial identity, the tension of living in the colonizer's environment and writing in the colonizer's language. In her keynote address to the Modern Language Association in 1991, Mary Louise Pratt formulated the concept of the contact zone. I quote, "I use this term to refer to social spaces where cultures meet, clash, and grapple each other, often in context of highly asymmetrical relations of power, such as colonialism, slavery, or their aftermaths, as they lived out in many parts of the world today." Unquote. In our current discussion on post-colonial identity, we are mainly concerned with this aftermath of colonial rule and how it makes its presence felt in the lived experiences of people. The Shadow Lines is an exercise in articulating these lived experiences through the memoir of a nostalgic and somewhat overly imaginative narrator and the story of his family, which binds 3 different countries and cities located thousands of miles apart. The political events and personal idiosyncrasies that dominate the narrative in the Shadow Lines are all directly or indirectly a legacy of colonial rule. Let us consider the narrator's cousin Ila, who is an Indian citizen by birth but has spent her entire life traveling around the world. Ila is contemptuous of the Indian way of life and escapes to England so that she can live life in her own terms. In a discussion with the narrator on the importance of political events, she disdainfully claims that political events in India are not as significant as those in Britain. I quote, "Well, of course, there are famines and riots and disasters," she said, "but those are local things. After all, not like revolutions or anti-fascist wars, nothing that sets a political example to the world, nothing that's truly remembered." Unquote. Ila, despite being a socialist activist herself, succumbs to the familiar colonial hangover of Eurocentrism, where events in the colonial center assume paramount importance, while events in the erstwhile colonized margins fade into insignificance, even if they involve the death of 500,000 people. I would like to focus on one segment of Ila's statement, nothing that's truly remembered. Remembering, as we know, is a deeply political act, and throughout the Shadow Lines, we find memory as an unstable and inconsistent force, people remembering the same event differently or choosing to forget. For example, the 1964 riots in Kolkata and Dhaka were quickly forgotten by both the media and the public, so much so that the narrator was unable to convince his friends that the riots actually happened. The narrator, however, remembers it in graphic detail simply because it was personal. In the Dhaka riots, he lost his uncle, and the violence of Kolkata gave him a trauma for life. In the narrative of the Shadow Lines, memory is associated with identity or the lack of it. In his book Identity, Youth and Crisis, Erik Erikson pointed out that in the post-colonial period, there can be a crisis between the national identity and the personal identity due to their expectations from the country and society being different from the reality. This identity crisis is particularly prevalent in the case of the diaspora, as we find in Rushdie's Shame, where he talks about being a quote-unquote translated man and a quote-unquote man born across. Rushdie's past of cultural dislocation has resulted in him being unable to find his way around any of his quote-unquote imagined homelands, whether it's Britain or Pakistan or an India that exists only in his memories. In the Shadow Lines, we can examine the character of the narrator's grandmother, or Thamma as she was popularly known. All her life, Thamma had dreamed of being free, her idea of freedom being intrinsically linked with the freedom of her nation. In her discussion with her grandson, she flatly confessed that she would have killed a British magistrate during the freedom movement. I quote, "Yes, I would have killed him. It was for our freedom. I would have done anything to be free," unquote. But when in 1947 the colony of British India gained freedom through its division into the countries of India, West Pakistan and East Pakistan, Thamma's ideas of freedom was ruptured completely, along with a sense of belonging in the nation. Though Thamma proudly identified as a Hindu and an Indian and was quite clearly an Islamophobe, she was born and brought up in Dhaka, which was a foreign country now, and ironically, a Muslim majority one at that. Thamma's post-colonial nationalism, which reached its peak when her nephew Tridib was killed in Dhaka, led her to donate her coveted gold chain to fund India's war against Pakistan, which she hoped would help to gain freedom from quote-unquote them. It is interesting to note that by now Thamma's enemy has changed. The British has been replaced by the Muslims and the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. This is sadly the reality of post-colonial identity, where no individual was able to gain freedom in the way they envisioned. And instead, due to the malicious designs of the British colonial rulers, entire communities turned against each other and fought each other as enemies.
Soumyaeel, we have 2 more minutes.
Okay. Thamma could never truly be free, which is a metaphor for the Indian subcontinent, which continues to suffer the animosity caused by the British colonial rule long after 15th August 1947. Once Thamma arrived in Dhaka, she understood that an imaginary border had been created between the Dhaka of her memories and the Dhaka that she experienced now. She could not accept that her birthplace has changed and kept saying, I quote, "This is not Dhaka, take me to Dhaka," unquote. This is a nostalgia that the post-colonial generation is forever destined to carry, a longing for things past that are forever gone. Rushdie alluded to the same in this excerpt from Imaginary Homelands. I quote, "It may be that when the Indian writer who writes from outside India tries to reflect that world, he is obliged to deal in broken mirrors, some of whose fragments have been irretrievably lost." Unquote. Uh, in Rushdie's conception of post-colonial identity, language assumes monumental importance. All three texts in this paper is written in English, a language that Rushdie is always maintained is tainted by its colonial past and cannot be used as it is to narrate third world subject matter. In Shame, he regarded it as incapable of explicating certain emotions. When the lead character Omar Khayyam, who inhabited post-colonial Pakistan, was forbidden by his mothers to feel shame, he was also denied the right to feel discomfiture, modesty, shyness, an ardent place in the world, and many other emotions for which there are, I quote, no corresponding words in the English language, unquote. Rushdie deliberately and self-consciously used the word sharam in place of shame, which was his own way of decolonizing his past. Rushdie has alluded to the use of English as a negotiation and not by submission. In the ambiguities inherent in using English as a post-colonial diasporic writer, Rushdie perhaps finds a reflection of the struggles of the diaspora to assimilate within the colonizer's environment. To decolonize English might offer a sense of denouement to those struggles. I quote, "To conquer English may be to complete the process of making ourselves free," unquote. In conclusion, we come back to that crucial question, is decolonization possible through literatures of contact? The answer might lie in how Amitav Ghosh rejects the structure of the homogenized nation that was built entirely on European models and the mechanical restrictions of borders that come with it. The answer can also be found in how Rushdie uncovers the institutionalized racism that is ingrained in British society, which he calls the New Empire, the last standing bastion of British colonialism. I quote, "You talk about the race problem, the immigration problem, all sorts of problems. But the members of the new colony only have one real problem, and that problem is white people. British racism, of course, is not our problem. It's yours. We simply suffer from the effects of your problem," unquote. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Soumyaeel. Thank you. Brings in the issue of literature of contact. And while you were discussing this entire idea that how this entire native Indian or Afric realities are brushed aside as local events, I just couldn't help but being reminded of this wonderful lines of Aimé Césaire, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm actually a little blank on that. That when he said that, what did Hitler do that was not done by the French and the English for 2 long centuries in Africa and Asia, right? Just because Europe was perhaps given a dose of their own medicine for 10 years, and we have this entire array of political resistance and political narratives of resistance growing out of it. Césaire was, of course, not in favor of Hitler's aggression, but he just wanted to make it a point that how, when it comes to the Caucasian history, it is history, and when it comes to us, the brown people, it's always local events. Thanks for reminding us of this stark hypocrisy in the colonial system once again, and how this negotiation through contact is something that stirs us to this new consciousness and makes us forever aware of remaining resistant to any such meta-narrative. Thank you, Soumyaeel. That was a wonderful paper. Right.
Thank you, sir.
Right. Now, we'll be moving to our next presenter. This is Souvik Datta. Souvik, I just have one confusion in the list that I'm given. I have the names of 2 Souvik Dattas. Is there?
I saw that too, Sharono,
Okay.
and I don't know who the other person is because I haven't sent an abstract of that type. So
right. I guess so. That's a little confusion over there, which is sorted right now. So, Souvik Datta, the title of your paper is "Refuted Marginalities: Questionable Portrayals of Devdas Heroines in Hindi Cinema." So, this one is going to be one blockbuster one, I'm sure. Souvik, as and when you are ready, right. The stage is yours.
Right.
Kindly make your
Thank you.
right.
Thank you,
Yeah, I can
Sharono.
see.
Yeah. So I wish good morning to everyone, and I'm an assistant professor of English at Delhi University, And it was just reminiscent, the paper on shadow lines just now. It's ironical because I'm teaching that paper right now. So I had a great time listening to the presentation that Soumyaneel made. Right. So I'll proceed with my paper directly. Sharachandra Chattopadhyay's novel Devdas is perhaps the most widely adapted among all his works. The novel, for its exceptional story and unforgettable characters, added a unique dimension to the author's contemporary life and to Bengali society in general. It has been widely adapted into film, lacking regard for boundaries of language, culture, time, geographic location, and so on. Most adaptations have been specific to the socio-cultural ethos of the time and the target audience catered to. What is it that makes Devdas such a cult classic? Among various limits and liberties that these screen adaptations exhibit, a key question remains: the unique depiction and role of the two major women who enter Devdas's life. Interestingly, the films diverge in their depiction when compared to the Bengali literary original. What strikes us or remains with us is the rather unconventional portrayal of women, particularly in terms of characterization. Center and margin are two important terms in deconstruction. Jacques Derrida used center to represent a point of presence, a fixed origin, that limits the play of the structure in which it is made to exist. A center also becomes a condition, determinant, or measure for meaning generated in the presence of the structure. Margins and marginality are relationally constituted, be it through representation or interpretation, a binary opposition to the center designating borders, boundaries, or the periphery itself. This paper seeks to determine how, in their chronological progressions, each film adaptation has portrayed women differently from the novel. Taking up one film at a time, these divergent portrayals vis-a-vis the novel are sought to be examined with a linear trajectory of meaning derived through interpretation. Thereafter, the paper would seek to connect this to the larger debate for which it is intended. Coming to the 1936 adaptation, which is by Promotesh Borua, unlike the novel, the film merely touches upon Devdas's discovery in Abandoned by Chandra, who is the equivalent of Chandramukhi, and her nursing of him, completely omitting all details of the elongated quest undertaken and the lengths resorted to. Devdas's use of the word wife for her, true love, and devotion are all missing in the film. Borua was unable to bring forth her unrequited, unconditional love. Chandra appears reduced to a flat character in these scenes, serving some banal plot functions. Was Borua way too mindful of her love for Devdas, being strong enough to overshadow the romance of the lead pair and the baggage of social norms and customs it came with? Or was he relaying the marginal position and inability of transgression courtesans of the time were condemned to? Chattopadhyay's Parvati was brave, bold, and disregarding of social customs inasmuch as she considered fit within the boundaries of reason. In the film, Paro dominates the narrative by means of her role, personality, perspective, and action. The film began with her, the very first shot itself. Most of the dialogues, the best and prominent ones, were given to her. Borua, however, does suggest that the title aside, this is largely Paro's story, as she introduces the narrative. Parvati has a joint destiny with the protagonist, Devdas. Her portrayal is a raw representation of Chattopadhyay's, but the movie is largely about Paro and defies the title Devdas. Creekmore observes that Borua's treatment of the Devdas myth had also emphasized Paro's experience. There are no surprises in Chandramukhi's portrayal considering the era it was set in, but Borua's tussle with the marginality attributed to Paro is remarkable. While he could do little given his obligation to the novel and its temporal location, he marks the beginning of adaptive innovation to revise Chattopadhyay's 1917 classic. Apparent through a genealogical survey, Borua must be credited for subtly inaugurating the center margin conflict in the spectrum of Devdas's Hindi film adaptations. Slowly but surely, this marks a historical epoch in the postmodernist resistance to prevalent meta-narratives like patriarchy leading to subjugation. To the 1955 adaptation now, which is by Bimal Roy, Chattopadhyay's young Parvati was far more selfless than Roy's little girl. This director seemingly skipped the regressively inert role attributed to women, swapping it for a character who knew what she desired. A woman of substance would be even more unthinkable in the Bengali Hindu society of Sharat's time, but his characterization of Parvati has colossal similarities with Elizabeth Bennet. The manner in which Parvati refuses Devdas's offer of marriage after her marriage is fixed reminds us the way Elizabeth spurned Mr. Darcy's marriage proposal. There is similar strength in personality and self-pride, which is highly unexpected of a Hindu Bengali woman in the early 20th century. The blazing personality of Roy's heroine sets the tone for a woman who remained passionate and fairly spontaneous in her expression of emotions, adding consistency to her growth graph vis-a-vis the narrative. One glaring point of departure from the plot is to be found in Roy's Paro and Chandramukhi crossing paths in the film. A directorial alteration of the novel for particular purposes. This seems to be a brilliantly subtle move to establish personal quests, a befitting reply to the patriarchal center which had doomed women to the margins without any agency of their own. This unknown complicity is not a walk on the part of resignation, but an active intervention challenging their marginalized fate in social terms. Importantly, in consonance with the novel, Devdas acknowledges that Chandramukhi was indeed someone really close to his heart, equivalent in terms of the book, where he calls her his wife, albeit in a single instance. Unlike Borua, Paro's portrayal by Roy is both a variation of Chattopadhyay's heroine and largely resistant to unacceptable suppression. The stark upliftment from her position in the previous adaptation, this time at the level of action, clearly illustrates that the winds of change have begun to blow. Oblivious but unacknowledged female bonding occurs, the woman is more assertive. She has begun to break away from her muted self of suffering, learning to cultivate assertion instead. No longer demure and muted, Roy Sparrow is more vocal than her literary counterpart, be it in action or body language. The conflict between center and margins have begun, with tiny steps towards establishment of equality, and the destruction of patriarchy appears to have commenced. In the 2002 adaptation by Bhansali, Paro, seemingly an object of sympathy for him, is nevertheless crafted rather carefully. Unlike Chattopadhyay, his Paro seems a strange combination of vulnerability and firmness of view. Sharachandra's Paro was almost always a damsel in distress and a silent sufferer of fate and servitude. Paro in the film exhibits an attempt to break free, yet conforming to social normativity. Contrastingly, the wispiness of Chandramukhi is disturbing. Bhansali's courtesan figure has none of the fiery potential of Chattopadhyay's. Bhansali's Chandramukhi has none of the sacrifice, servitude, and resignation to austerity that makes her, his woman, an exception. There is no visualization of her nursing him, and her accurate monologue on Devdas's predicament and Paro are omitted. Whether to illustrate female bonding or visual spectacle of the two women crossing, Bhansali makes them confront each other, converse and console, even dance and celebrate their love for Devdas, utilizing Durga Puja as the context for all of this. Yet Paro and Chandramukhi do not visibly illustrate attempts to help Devdas battle his exigency. Both of them are too typically weak and helpless without agency, neither actively toil to save Devdas from his devastating end. Neither are outrightly rebellious, but both kindle hope, remaining within coordinates of traditional roles assigned by their novelist. Yet they attempt to destabilize and question the center, remaining in the margins, and important questions are asked by Chandramukhi, and inclusive attempts are traced to Paro. In Devdi, Anurag Kashyap's film, the prioritization of Chanda's character over that of Paro is interesting. Chanda is so much more than Chandramukhi.
So we have 2 minutes, right? Sure.
Yeah. Chanda, being a woman who had been stripped of her innocence early on, has greater agency than Chattopadhyay's character, helping reform Dev, utilizing the same. Her character stands out and shines. Their relationship remains unique till the end of the film. Perhaps that is why Dev gives her a token of recognition in the form of the ring, which Sharot's heroine never managed to acquire. However, Paro's role and relationship with Dev is the greatest disappointment with respect to the novel. Was the agency given to Chanda stolen from Paro's share? One wonders. And the portrayal of Paro, however, is disappointing. It worsens with the servitude exhibited in visiting Dev and being almost akin to a servant to him. Therefore, Paro may not be as impactful as Chandramukhi, but Kashyap compensates through the character of Rasika, who is an additional character, almost an alter ego to her. Rasika is anything but marginalized, and Chandra bore the brunt of patriarchal violence. Dev here uses Paro just for sex. So, it's not a very happy state for the woman from Paro's point of view. Coming to the last adaptation, Das Dev, Sudhir Mishra's political saga actually shows that the woman has arrived, with Paro actually answering to Dev every time, actually turning away from him. You see her exhibiting an agency like no one else has. Similarly, Chandramukhi, as the role of the manipulator, shows a different sort of agency, a different sort of emancipation that, you feel a woman of the 21st century deserves to exhibit. So then, what is the conclusion? I'll come to the conclusion directly. I'll have to skip. Uh, no portrayal can be innocent with criticism in existence. Paro and Chandramukhi appear to be caught at the crossroads between the center and the margins, victims at the hands of the novelist and multiple filmmakers, changing depictions in their cinematic portrayals in tune with the visions of the latter are likely results of ensuing socio-temporal conflicts. Roughly in the initial three adaptations, there appear to have been a vacillating stance adopted by the filmmakers, moving between the grand narrative of a patriarchal center that posits women on the periphery of society, by relegating them to the private domain in a state of submission. This raises pertinent issues because viewed as a spectrum, the five films are consistent in the stance taken on Devdas's heroines. This puts the viewer or critic in a dilemma because when they claim affiliation to the novel, and the genealogy is viewed using the lens of postmodernism, then the two recent films appear to be on the brink of what is called a postmodernist breakthrough, with the final adaptation having made the cut. The projection of women is a proportionately acceptable representation in tandem with the time frame of its creation. However, nothing justifies the violence caused from meta-narratives like patriarchy and limitations that constitute social realities for these characters. But optimism is heralded with the two women beginning to attempt refuting their forced marginalities. This is witnessed in the consistent movement to count to the center, a partially conscious effort to break the shackles of time that bind them, resisting their confines within the context the novelist had imprisoned them in. Thank you.
Thank you, Souvik. Thank you. You had to hurry towards the end. I'm sorry for the time constraint. It was a wonderful take on this entire Hoover of Devdas, if I may say so. Actually, whenever I see Devdas or any adaptation of it, it's absolutely a personal observation. I feel that it has taken, and now that I have listened to your paper, like it has taken more than 50 years and 5 films and so many directors to make this text come out of this narrative of pity, if I may say, the meta narrative of patriarchal pity, and at the same time, it just emphasizes, your paper actually emphasizes the dire need of the afterlife of a text. It's so very essential that we need to go back to them. So, every time I hear these things that you must not be considerate of the canons because canons are imposing narratives on you, I feel a little skeptic, and your paper has reinforced the skepticism because we need to go back to the canons and revisit them. They need to have an afterlife and come out of the claustrophobic meta-narratives that we have imposed upon them. Thank you. That was a wonderful take. I'm sure that when
thank you, Saranya.
I definitely would love to give it a read. Thank you. This brings us to the penultimate speaker for the day. This is Sri Lakshmi P. And from Devdas, this is from Devdasi's contemporary dancing girl, the position of female, right? Sri Lakshmi, if you are ready, you may start off with your presentation.
Yes. So before starting, there is a small missing in my title. My title is From Devdasis to Contemporary Dancing Girl, the Position of Female Dancers in the Postmodern Indian Society. So my paper title, From Devdasis, Contemporary Dancing Girl, the Position of Female Dancers in the Postmodern Indian Society, with the aid of the short film titled Devdasi by Lena Lakshmi, aims to trace the history, role and position of Devdasis in India, and also to bring the state of female dancers in the present postmodern Indian society. It tries to emphasize the need for the revival of the once popular art forms to make the present generations aware of the tradition behind it. And it also traces the identity crisis that the classical dance performers face in the postmodern scenario, as their divine art faces challenge with their present day popular art forms. So India is a rich country of cultures where people live in their culture and is often associated with the word diversity and culture. Everyone respects and honor Indian culture a lot. The culture is everything like the way of behaving with others, ideas, customs we follow, arts, handicrafts, religions, food habits, festivals, music and dance, everything are part of our culture. And India is a big country with high population where people of various religions with unique culture live together. And people believe and follow various customs and traditions according to their own religions. We celebrate festivals according to our own rituals, keep fast, take bath in holy water of Ganga, worship and pray to God, sing ritual songs, dance, eat delicious dinner, wear colorful dresses and other lots of activities. Tradition and talent are terms that we come across very frequently in India. They have been used and overused until they have started to sound like empty cliches. It is therefore worth examining both the terms more closely. So any art form is a living form because it is integrally intervened with culture, region, religion, language and politics of a particular country until it becomes a custom. It is true that the Indian classical dance forms are traditional and have a long history. We can say that the Indian classical art form has always followed the master-disciple relationship, that is the Guru-Shishya Parampara. A large number of people tend to assume that these classical forms are temple originated. It is usually done in temples and thus ensures a sense of sacred power in it. And linked with religion continues to shape its practice. So, dance is the form of vibration of our body and mind. It is a form of worship through which a dancer can reach the Almighty. India has a long tradition of fine arts and classical and folk music and dances. Some of the world famous dance forms that originated and evolved in India are Bharatanatyam, Kathakali, Kathak, Satriya, Kuchipudi, Manipuri, Mohiniyattam and Odissi. So they are effective in carrying forward the various mythological stories from generation to generation while entertaining the audience. It eventually became a part of Natya Shastra as proponented by sage Bharata to compile and forge some rules and regulations of entertaining arts. With time, the classical dances evolved to include the expressions and themes from social life and experiences. So, classical Indian dance mirrors traditional Indian culture. Dance, the most delicate expression of human culture, is supposed to be an undiluted enjoyment for the art lover. But the majority of the written sources in the Hindu tradition, including the great epics that is Mahabharata and Ramayana, tend toward male-centeredness. Although not quite misogynist, these texts regard women as marginal to religious concerns. Women are perceived as dependent on and subservient to males. Cultural attributes play a significant role in this. The most famous and influential Hindu law book of Manu specifically mentions that young women must be under the control of their fathers, married women under the control of their husbands, and widows under the control of their sons. So without male guidance and control, women are expected to be socially irresponsible and dangerous. An unmarried young woman is expected to learn the arts of being a good wife. Society expected her to be a householder, fully religious and adhering to the duties of a woman. They are expected to undertake fasts and other ritual observances on behalf of others. Conventionally, perhaps due to socio-cultural norm, females have been portrayed as submissive while taking roles in dance. In ancient days, the whole South India was one region called Tamilakam. The non-history of Tamilakam has chiefly derived from the Sangam literature. From these works, we understand that dance and music had gained more popularity in this spirit. In addition to Sangham works, Chilapadigaram, Manimekhalai, which are considered as the post-Sangham works, threw light on the life and culture of the dancers. From this, we can understand the high place that the art of dance was given in these days in Tamilakam. During the post-Sangham era, a large proportion of employment in temples was reserved for women, though they were not employed in government services. Among these, the post of Devdasis was most important, to which well-born and highly educated ladies proficient in the arts were appointed. So, literally, Devdasis means servant of God or goddess, and the practice of Devdasi system prevailed in ancient India. Under Devdasi practice, girls are dedicated, preferably as virgins, into temple service or religious mendicancy. As described by Kalavani, originally the duty of Devdasis was taking care of the temples and performing rituals. These women learned and practiced Bharatanatyam, Odissi and other classical Indian artistic traditions and enjoyed a high social status as dance and music were
Shri Lakshmi, we
essential.
have 2 more minutes.
Okay, sir. Essential parts of temple service. So they have played a prominent role in promoting various forms of performing arts and music. They are known by such epithets like Tevaradial, and Adigal. But when Devdasis degenerated into harlots, society ceased to honor and support them. So the short film titled Devdasi by Lena Lakshmi traces the history and role and also the position of Devdasis in India. It clearly shows through Devdasi system, though Devdasi system was begun as religious practice, it turned to be a practice of providing service of unmarried girls to rich and high class people. Devdasi practice causes set of social problems to Hindu religion. The Devdasi women were sophisticated, knowledgeable, and respected in the community during the ancient days, as they represented culture and arts while being married to gods. But in a short time, the Devdasi system began to be viewed with disfavor, and women who had once been in the Devdasi families became ashamed to admit it. But they serve as models for female dancers of the present society. Now, women's role is being perceived in a more elevated light, and sexual subordination is on the decline. It is almost on the verge of eradication in the field of dance, as women are now able to learn and portray the roles according to their wish. In a new milieu, they have definitely tried to develop their own idiom, the own visual language, and in the process have successfully added to the vocabulary of perceiving women formed differently from the conventional way of representation. Women artists today are trying to deviate from the popular feminine representations. They are trying to break away from the explicit physically and idealization of the body by de-glamorizing the body, sometimes simplifying the body and its embellishments to remove it from the state of being only an object of desire. In Kerala, even today, a small number of actresses known as Nanyas have chosen the profession of dancing, acting and singing, and they have created their own theatre called Nanyarkudam. So the present day society, which is considered as a postmodern society, gives less importance to classical art forms, which is considered to be divine as it requires strenuous practices. And even after dedicated sessions, the popularity that a performer earned is questionable as for the present generation. The popular is never the classical art forms, but the contemporary forms of art like hip hop, belly, etc., as it is easily makeable and can even invent own moves. So this should be changed, and all the art forms and the performers should be given a high status in this land. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. That was a critical research that you have done for this paper, for sure. And once we get to read your full paper, we'll be much enlightened. Thank you for your effort. That was really enlightening. This brings me to the final speaker of the day, of this session, Dr. Sri Krishna Mondal. Dr. Mondal, are you present? I can't see Dr. Mondal in my people's list over there. Nope. So this session, unfortunately, missed the opportunity of listening to Somenath Bhattacharjee, the first speaker and the last speaker in Dr. Sri Krishna Mondal. But I don't know, someone is willing to join. Though your profile name doesn't suggest this, Akif, but by any chance, is Somenath Bhattacharjee or Dr. Sri Krishna Mondal present in this particular meeting? All right. If not, then this actually concludes the paper presentations. I do have a few minutes of time before the beginning of the plenary sessions for the day. So I'd request all of you to interact or question. I throw this session open for interactions, questions, comments, if any, because physical seminars, offline seminars, as they are now popularly termed, would have given us this opportunity to mingle with each other a lot more. That would have been perhaps far more intellectually stimulating, but then again, reality needs to be accepted. But even on this virtual platform, if any one of you would like to interact or comment on anyone's paper, or maybe for that matter, feel like didn't really manage to elaborate on a very important point of your paper within the stipulated 10 minutes time, you can now actually offer the same to your fellow presenters. All right. I guess everyone is kind of satisfied with their own presentations, and apparently there is no questions as well. So this brings us to the end of this technical session, which was the parallel session number 5 for the day 2 of this international seminar. We do have the plenary sessions coming up at 12 o'clock. Make sure you're joining them because these are, we have, if I'm not wrong, 3 plenary sessions today. So there would be quite intellectually stimulating one. Yes, as the IFES team has rightly popped the message up at the right time, we have the session at 12 noon, the third plenary session, and the streaming link is very much there on your chat box, so you can very well click on that and join in time. I once again thank you, the wonderful papers that I did have the good opportunity of listening to this morning. I've taken notes and I've made it a point that I'll be going through certain texts, certain art forms that I didn't really manage to, go through so far. And all of you, majority of you are still in your MA days, doing your MPhil researches. My heartfelt congratulations to you for taking this opportunity. And of course, we have assistant professors and professionals from different fields as well. So thanks again for joining and making this session a success. It was wonderful hosting you, and it would be wonderful when you join for the plenary session as well. Have a nice day, and tomorrow is the final day of our seminar. Make sure you're joining tomorrow as well, right? And once the book is ready, when the papers are edited and the volume is out, of course, you'd be given copies. And I'd personally love to read through the papers that I did manage to chair, right? Thank you. Thanks again. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Soumyadeep. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.